I've had a couple of guys write in and say they're having problems with the electrical system on their classic Ford, and it can be a real issue on these things. These can have some problems with power. And this one we know will run. We've done it before. You've seen the video. We've got it started and running right here. So we know we have a working electrical system to that point that it will start and run. But these guys were specifically asking about lights and what to do to check the lights out. On this particular car, I can pull the switch and see what happens. Nothing. No dash lights coming on. No lights coming on out at the end. Nothing out there. If I go to park lights, you can look at the park lights. I have park lights, but I don't have any headlight function. Now this is a fairly common problem on the Ford line. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through and look at it and see what's causing us to not have any function on our headlights. Because, you know, we don't want Jackson driving around without any headlights. That's not a good thing at all.
For 45 years, the Miller family and the dedicated staff at Autocrafters have been here helping you to restore your dream Ford. Thank you for your support. Here's to another 45 years of delivering parts for your Falcon, Fairlane, F100, Galaxy, Maverick, and Pinto.
I feel like I'm posing for an 1860s photograph. Anyway, back to the real world here. I have my meter out. I'm going to bring this thing into play in just a second because I want to check continuity, and I also want to check and see if I've got voltage running to my headlights. So I'm going to put this out of the way over here. Also, I have my battery box hooked up to my battery because this is going to start sucking some power out of the system if we start playing around with the lighting on this car. And what I'm going to show you is where everything is kind of at on a Ford, generally speaking. Now, we have two wire sets that are heading out to the outside of the firewall. We also have our conveniently uncovered voltage regulator. This one, who knows, maybe it's in good shape, maybe it's not. But with it being uncovered like that, it kind of makes me wonder if we don't have a problem there. This is usually a big switch unit that's pretty bulky. They don't typically go bad, really, honestly, but you want to kind of keep an eyeball on it. I'm going to probably change this one out for a known good one that I have here. I keep these things around because you never know when you're going to need one. So there. From there, we know we have 12 volts coming to the lighting system because of our previous test. We turned the lights on and the park lights came on. That is a good sign. That means we do have power running through the full electrical system to the wires. On a Ford, typically, you have two sets of wires coming to the outside of the car. You have this set of wires right here. These two wires are going out to your parking lights, and they have a power supply that runs back over to the other parking light. But there's also, they are part of the turn signal system as well, so that's going to be part of what's going over around here to the other side of the car. All of your headlights are tied together in series, but your parking lights have a separate setup for right and left turn signals. So there's a wire for that, and there's also a wire for right and there's a wire for left. We're not worried about this. We know that our parking light system at least works pretty well. The other ones that you're looking for are your headlight wires, and that on this particular car, these wires are running out here to the front, and it looks like they're going out to the headlight. So this must be your headlight harness. Now, a lot of these old Fords, this stuff's painted, so you're going to have to deal with that. We'll see if I can get these two to separate so I can check it to here for 12 volts. And sometimes this can be a real pain to get these to come apart. So I've got these two separated. This is your wire coming in, and your power wire on a Ford is almost always the encased wire. If you've got wire power going out to something, Ford will encase it. This is what I would call the dead leg of it. This doesn't have any power to it in any way, shape, or form. You have your ground wire that comes off of all of this, and I'll show you that in just a second. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the headlights on, and I'm going to see if I've got 12 volts running to this section of the harness. Headlights are on. Well, the switch is on, the headlights not so much. Okay, so I'm going to put my red in here. I'm going to go to a ground. Let's say we got a whole lot of nothing here. Check the other leg to make a wire out of me if that's the case. So we do not have any power to this end of the harness. Now that's a quick way to check that, because you can also take your headlights off if you have one that's not functioning. Always check and make sure the bulb's okay, because it could be you have a bad bulb in here and that's why that one light is not working. It may not be a wiring problem, it may just be a problem with the bulb needing to be replaced. Now on these early Fords, your parking lights do not come on when the headlights are on, they turn off. So you're only running that much voltage through them. Some of the later cars, I do believe they have what they call running lights on them, where you have the side marker lights and the marker lights in the front that will stay on when the headlights are on. All right, that's not doing anything, it's just sitting there looking pretty. So I'm going to put this one back together for right now, and I'm going to take the park lamps, turn the park lamps on, and run the same test just to validate myself. Turn it to park. I got one park light on, one park light off. Let's see if we got any power running to it. Yeah, we've got voltage. There we go. Finally, the ground came through for me, and that's at 11.6 volts. Not great, but not bad. That means that this parking light is getting power. We know we got power here. I'll plug it back in, and the parking light re-illuminates. All right, so now what I've done is I moved to the main disconnect on this, and I'm trying to trace this through the harness to where we have our first stoppage for power, because you can have a problem at the main disconnect. There can be an issue there with corrosion. You can see this pin right here is a little dark. The rest of these look a little suspicious. So we'll probably get some, when we go to final on this car, we're going to go in and clean these up and put some grease on there. Not dielectric grease, but some regular grease. Just rub a little bit on there so that you have a better connection. Axle grease, oddly enough, works pretty good for a good connection, so you can use that on here. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. Ford always puts insulation around the wire where it comes out. If you've got a wire that's a power wire going into the chassis for something, the main power wire coming in is going to have insulation around it. I'm going to try to do a check on this and see what we get for voltage. Yep, 12.42. So we know that our main power wire coming into the fuse panel and the ignition switch and also the headlight switch is okay. We know because this car will start and run and the turn signals on it work. I'll show you that in just a minute. But I'm going to plug this back up. If I can find it to plug it back up. All right, so we know now that that works. Now it gets tougher because now we're inside the cab of the car. Yay! All right, so your wiring is the black wire coming into the car. That wire on this particular car, and that would be probably a Mustang, Falcon Fairlane, will go with the black wire coming in to the fuse panel. But your headlight wire goes in a splice off of the black wire, and typically on these it is a red with orange wire, and that's this wire right here. So this red with orange wire is the one you're going to want to check first. Now I'm going to take and pull my system in here, return on my voltmeter. I'm going to put this one on the headlights here, and then I'm going to find ground. Sometimes this is a real pain to do, honestly. It's sometimes hard to get a ground on this stuff. It was there for just a second, I saw it. There we go. 12.23 volts. So we know that going to the headlight switch, we have 12.23 volts. So we have 12 volts going to the switch. Now, from here, for the headlights, it goes off of the switch unit here and goes down to the dimmer switch, and that's this thing right here. Basically, this is attached to the floor, and that is also a ground point for the system. Ford is really hep on ground. So here's what we've got. Your main power feed coming into this is right here. This plug point, here a minute, there we go. Briefly, I saw 12 volts. That means we've got 12 volts coming down to this. 12.32 volts going down to the dimmer switch. Why is that dimmer switch important? Well, your dimmer switch actually controls your lights. If the dimmer switch breaks or the connection inside of it goes south or it's not in series, you will not have headlights. Now, you can short it and just have low beams or just have high beams, but that's a big part of your headlight system on these cars. So all these things have to be working correctly. Now I'm going to pop out of here and I'm going to talk about some majors that you're going to need to keep an eye on when you're doing this. I'm going to go ahead and do the first one here. Your chassis is your ground for your instrument cluster on an early Ford, all the way up through, I believe, 1968. In 1969, Ford went to a little bit more of a different system. They still had a chassis ground to the instrument cluster, but on the 68 Torinos and any car with a circuit board on it, the ground is actually on a wire coming off of the circuit board. If it's a pre-1968 or 1969 Mustang, it still grounds to the instrument cluster right here. This one has a metal backing plate in it, and that backing plate screws right here on the instrument cluster itself. So if you don't have a good solid ground on these, you may have instrumentation issues where your instruments aren't reading correctly. And you'll be going, why don't I have any reading on this? That's exactly why right there. I'm going to move out for some of these other ones and talk about them because there are points that need to be taken a look at whenever you're having a headlight problem. So away we go. All right, wiring diagram must be obtained. You must have one of these. This is not obviously a full wiring diagram, but you need to have a wiring diagram of your automobile, whatever that automobile is. If you're working on a 66 Falcon, you can actually use the 66 Mustang wiring diagram because the Falcon and the Mustang, oddly enough, are very, very similar in 66. Wiring colors are the same. Wire position and setup are the same. If you wanted to, you could probably even put an American Auto wire harness in it because the Mustang harness is about the same as a Falcon. Don't tell American Auto Wire I said that. It's not in their catalog that way, I don't think. Although I haven't looked at their catalog in a couple of years. They may have one for this car now. I don't know. But wiring diagram. Anytime you're working on a wiring problem on a car, if you have a diagram, you're 100 miles ahead of where you'd be if you don't. The one thing I'll say beyond what I showed you inside the cab is that grounds are important everywhere on a Ford. I don't care what you're talking about, from tail lights all the way up to the headlights. Ford put grounds near any of the electrical outlets. In other words, if something was coming to, like the headlight, for instance, there is a ground wire close by that needs to be made sure that it is grounding correctly. What I will do when I'm going back through a car, I probably won't do a ton of it on wonky as long as the lights on wonky are working correctly. That's what the name is for this 66 Falcon four-door. I will go in and I will take a 3/8" nut driver because I can pull the wires off of here, clean up the 3/8 fastener on a wire wheel. This is something anybody can do. Put a little dab of grease on it and on the actual connector itself and screw that sucker back in place, and Viola, you've got a good connection again. I'm going to just show you an example of what Ford does. Okay, so looking at our 66 Falcon here, we have a ground for the passenger side headlight here, and then we have a ground on the back of the voltage regulator, which, as I said before, is bare and shouldn't be. There's a ground right here for the headlights as well, and this one actually, I believe, is a dual ground because it's also the ground wire for your marker lights on the front, or the parking lights is what they would have been called early on, I believe. Please, by all means, correct me in the comments below. And it's just all about grounds. Seriously, it really is. Make sure you have a good positive connection everywhere, but you also want to make sure that your grounds are top notch. If your grounds aren't, you can start having problems. One of the things you can run into with bad grounds is a fluctuation in your lights, where the lights are pulsing. Don't want that? Make sure your grounds are okay. If you need to, you can go in and add an additional chassis ground somewhere, but I tend to want to just make sure that I have a good engine ground going from the intake manifold, let's say, one of the bolts on the top up there, all the way down somewhere on the firewall. Older style halogen headlights can cause a problem for that, and they can actually burn out the main wire feeding power to the headlights on these cars. These early cars especially, later Fords had a little bit thicker and better wire for the main power wire going in there, but the early Fords, the wire was pretty tiny. I really do recommend running a relay system on one of these and just using the wiring harness for starting up the headlights. In other words, it's just an on-off switch, but your main power is being run from the battery. You're running almost directly off the battery. There's a few companies out there doing them. Honestly, you can use a single headlight Mustang wiring harness for that, a relay wiring harness on these. We did a video a while back on how to set up a relay harness for a classic Ford. We did our own relay harness on our 69 Fairlane wagon. It worked out great. I'm not going to go into turn signals on this one. I'm not going to go into tail lights on this one because those have some of their own separate issues, but this is basically headlights. Make sure that you check the bulbs. Sounds stupid, but check the bulbs. Make sure they're functioning, as I said at the front of the episode. Check your connections at the bulbs. Make sure you're getting 12 volts at the headlights, and then work back from there through the system to the headlight switch. The last thing I'll say about that is headlight switches, they are sometimes the culprit, because if there's been let's say a set of halogen headlights put on here, they could have burned out the connector on that, and there could be a problem inside the headlight switch. If your inside lights are not dimming correctly, if they're spotty and they go in and out, you just want to replace that headlight switch, because the headlight switches on these things are available. Okay, so we've not put this thing completely back together yet, but what I wanted to show you is that with a ground wire attached to the dimmer switch and the dimmer switch attached to the harness, we have now a fully functioning headlight system. 50% of it's functioning. We know that one of the bulbs must be bad. It's the only reason for that to be doing what it's doing. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. We ran through the system, showed you how to check out the headlights so to make sure that yours are working correctly. So there you go. You know now what you need to do. But beyond that, do me a favor. Be kind to each other. Love on each other. Treat each other really nice, because it's the holidays and you want a lot of good gifts for Christmas. And you guys come back and see us next time. We'll see you on down the road. So many people yelling in my yard right now. When you have teenagers, they do that. They just stand out and yell at each other all the time. It's weird. We are going to be stepping off of Wonky for a little bit after we do the headliner. The headliner's coming up, but I have not yet gotten the paint for it. So if you're one that hangs around to the very end to find out what we're doing next, that's what's going on. We are going to be doing the headliner probably next week. Well, next week for you guys, because this next week's video we may not be able to shoot because it is Thanksgiving week. So we are going to take Thanksgiving Day off and not work, and that's Thursday. So that's normally our film day for Manic Mechanic. We may try to shoot a little earlier in the week, but I don't know. It's getting that time of year when nobody wants to do anything, right? Just want to sit around and eat and get fat. Take care, guys.